Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Thank you all so much for all the love and support you showing me here with. And please do not forget to smash that subscribe button. So today we'll be checking out a video a sister actually made. She was asking, why is it that pump colored people have mastered the strategy of oppression on many climates? And a lot of people really have their opinion and all that. And sincerely speaking, I didn't know how this video, how I saw this video, because this video came at the right time. This is something that they have mastered, they have internalized it. If you look around, you all will know that they do not oppress people that look like them. They oppress people that do not look like them, right? And if you all look around, you all will find out that the major people they oppress are the people that they are very scared of. Why do I say so? When you look at what is going on in Congo, what is going on in Sudan, Palestine, and all that, you find out that those people that they are oppressing so hard are people that got something to give out, people that have something in their countries. They have seen something, they saw something, and they want to have that thing you all have. So how did they get that thing you have? They look for a way to oppress you in a way that you cannot even speak up. Let's get into this.
How did they become so good at this? In your studies, how did white people become so good at the strategy of oppression on many climates? It's not even like, well, we was good at this in Africa, but we don't know how to do it in Mexico. The consistency and the efficacy of their oppressive manners is so prevalent that I find myself ever so often being like, this got to be supernatural. Are they the aliens? Because they're the only life on Earth that doesn't, that the sun doesn't help. Is it cultural?
Some historians talk about, the Dark Ages in Europe and how there was just so much war. When there's a tremendous amount of war anywhere in the world, what's going to happen is those people are going to develop better technologies to harm each other or to defend themselves. And ironically, that's why when we see all these movies about pre-modern Europe, it's always about war.
It really is always about war. You just cracked a code. How did they become so good at this? In your studies, how did white people become so good at the strategy of oppression on many climates?
One of the answers might surprise you. Outsourcing. The same thing that is destroying industrial communities from the Rust Belt to northern England. I read a book called Uncommon Wealth by Professor Kojokoram, a brilliant Ghanaian British historian, that makes the case that the same structures of power that we use to conquer the known world are at this moment turning against the same people that it benefited in the first place. And I think it also helps explain the type of detachments that Europeans feel about the atrocities that were committed in their name and benefited them. Because there's this idea in the world that the current nation-states of Europe, or their predecessors as states, actually carried out the rough work of colonization, when in fact they came later on into the business. Private companies did it first. To try to make sense of this, let's go back to the 16th century and the beginning of the movement of colonization from Europe. The political reality of Europe is much different than we have now. The borders were fungible, and the monarch wasn't an absolute ruler of their kingdom. He was just the most powerful of powerful lords, which meant that they were constantly in fight or flight mode. They had to fight their external enemies and their internal enemies, and more importantly, that drained their finances. A great deal of monarchs in Europe were in terrible debt, because they have to borrow for wars, for gifts, for the clothing that they had on their back that had to suit the type of image of power that they wanted to project. Which meant that for the expansion outside of their own kingdoms, they had to rely on private finance. And hence, several private companies appeared, like the British East India Company, the Portuguese East India Company, the Dutch East India Company, which was the first multinational in existence. There was also the Hudson Bay Company, the Royal African Company, the Dutch West Indies Company, and these companies were driven specifically by profit, not for religious reasons, although they were supported by religion, not by territorial expansion reasons, although they were enriched by the expansion of territory, but by profit and the extraction of it. And the countries in which these companies were based were benefiting from it, benefited from the trade that they brought, and the taxes that came from it, from the overall increasing prosperity. Side note, did you know that these companies had a social component to them? In their charters in the UK, companies like the Royal African Company, of Colston fame, stated that these companies had to provide social relief, build theaters, build schools, fund the poor. So when you see Colson buildings all around, don't think that he was just magnanimous. He was just doing what the law told him to do. It wasn't just largesse. But this primary approach favored violence and extraction as its goal. So it was a system of destruction and occupation that could be repeated again and again and again. Because it's not very inventive, and it doesn't take into consideration any of the people who are the targets of this exploitation. Because they're numbers, they're products, or they are the means to get to products. I think the last example of what this was like in practice was the Free Republic of the Congo, which was the private domain of Leopold II of Belgium, in which 10 million people were killed and a lot more were maimed to extract stuff like rubber and ivory. It is very easy to systematize violence when you have a goal that is not associated with it, and when you see it as a tool to get to that goal. And this outsourcing also allowed the rulers of Europe to remain a hand removed from whatever was happening in the ground. And this remove also contributed to the collective amnesia that European populations have of their role in benefiting from the process of colonialism, from slavery, from exploitation. Colonies were sources of funding, they were sources of exotic materials. They weren't there on the ground, and because they weren't presented with that reality, just the products that were extracted from them, they don't have any historical memory of it. That's why they say that, for instance, racism is an issue that happens in the United States and not in Europe. They didn't see the vast fields of slaves. They were concerned with their own exploitation as serfs, as mill workers. They didn't see the underbelly of it.
How did white people become so good at the strategy of oppression?
You should go watch the rest of that video because it was incredible. White people are so good at this strategy of oppression, we internalized it and then we do it to ourselves. And then whenever we get burned out, we have to go to experts and specialists and say things like, why can't I get myself to do what I wanted to do? And then the specialist says, what do you want to do? And they go, well, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. I say, what do you want to do? They say, well, I'm supposed to do all these things. I have to do all these things and we have to get them done. I say, do you want to do any of that? Because if you don't want to do any of that, you have reached the limits of how much you can oppress yourself without wanting to,
How did they become so good at this? In your studies, how did white people become so
When we learned about the history of colonization, there was one thing that stuck out to me whilst I was understanding how it took place. And that specifically had to do with how it was easy for them to outsource and use other people to do what they could do. And how good a lot of these people were at manipulating others to do these things for them. And you're probably wondering, why was there no resistance? Well, if you're very good at manipulating, you're very good at selling a dream. And yeah, if you learn about the history of slavery, a lot of these slaves that was taken to the North and the South American continent were promised a better life. Yeah, a better life, because that's why they got on the boat to be shipped on the other side of the world. And not only were they manipulated, but they also used religion to manipulate a lot of them and saying the reason why you're doing this is because the High Almighty said so. And yes, race, skin color did play an important part within that, because again, a lot of these indigenous people in different parts of the world that was exposed to colonization never saw Europeans before. It was their first time exposed to these type of people. So obviously looking at them, obviously they know what they're saying, obviously we would trust what they're doing. And hence why that led to a lot of atrocities that took place in different parts of the world. And hence why they got away with a lot of these things that they did historically.
How did they become so good at this? In your studies, how did white people become so
White people got so good at oppression because their ancestors mastered it, and now it's built into their very DNA. Epigenetics is something that you need to look up. The more that your ancestors do something, the more it is literally coded into the fiber of your being. You don't have to learn things anymore. That's how animals pop out and immediately start walking within 30 minutes. It is built into their DNA, and oppression can be built in the same exact way.
Strategy of oppression.
This might be a slight tangent, but welcome to my Roman Empire, because I have this thought no less than once a day. We have seen studies show that the trauma of slavery has appeared in the DNA of Black Americans and has been passed down through the generations. So if 1 + 1 = 2, what's to say that after centuries of violence and wars and torture and all this other stuff, what's to say that white people haven't also been altered on a DNA level? Their inherent talent for oppression and violence throughout the years has rewired them with this core lack of empathy and inability to connect with others. And that is what we're seeing in the modern day right now. These are the tangents that my brain goes on.
So this is all I got from this video, and when I saw this video, I was like, I mean, this is what they know how to do best, you know, oppressing. That is one thing I know they have mastered, and nobody's going to take that away from them, you know. And I look at what is going on all over the world, and you all can see that this oppressing something is something that they have mastered, that they have internalized it. And you look around and they look for people that they know that they can oppress. Because I keep asking myself, why is it that they are not oppressing themselves? Because if you all have not mastered this, you would have also, like, you know, man, we saw something in such and such places, maybe like one of the European countries, and we need to take it and all that. And number one is that I also found out that most mineral resources are not, they do not have most of all these mineral resources. So what they do is that they look for countries or where they have all that and look for a way to oppress them. And what I meant by oppressing is that they look for a way to take it because they like stealing. Stealing is something that they know how to do best. They love stealing. And so for that reason, you see them all the time looking for a way to get into where they are not supposed to be. And where they are not supposed to be is usually where they love to go. So if you see what is going on in Congo right now, this is more like it. If you see what is going on in Sudan, more like it. Palestine and all that. They go to people that look like me. People that don't look like them. Yeah. Check all of it. All the whole thing. You know, this thing that started, like, you know, this Palestine thing, and really opened a lot of people's eyes to know how horrible their government is, or how horrible their leaders are, and how horrible they have been. I mean, they have been oppressing people, making people's life a living hell. I mean, this is all I got to say. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.